Okay, welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. That means the Regeneration broadcast. And if you can name that tune, please drop it in the comments. Mike,
I don't know. I'm doing fine. I'm trying to name that tune. Welcome to the show that never ends.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends.
Show that never ends. Kind of like speed metal. Am I in the right genre? Okay.
No.
Poser metal. Okay.
No, not metal at all, actually.
Oh.
So we'll see what maybe Dave and Louise know. But so here I have every show starts with the story, and I got a million stories, right? So one story goes back to 1989 in the summer when I was visiting Dublin. And it was a great trip. I mean, it was not just a visit to Dublin, it was a visit to the ancestral homeland. And I even went to the church where my grandfather was baptized to finish his baptismal record, the record of his death. And that was in Carrick-on-Shannon. But I spent about, 4 days in Dublin. And one of the days I spent in Dublin was a Saturday. And probably most listeners don't know this unless they're from Ireland, that the place to go on Saturday in Dublin, at least in 1989, was Grafton Street, because it was a cool thing. And there was so much going on, and there were buskers all over the place.
We were probably
One
there.
Group of buskers.
Yeah.
Was that Dave?
We were probably there hanging out as teenagers.
Well, that's where I was going.
Yeah.
Because there were
outside HMV.
Yeah. Dressed
So
as
I
Robert
was-
Smith from The Cure.
I was in my late 20s at the time, and there was this group of kids, and they were probably, 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 or 8 of them.
It's
And they were
definitely
playing
you.
Water
It's
Boys.
definitely you. Yeah.
They were playing
Yeah.
Water
Yeah.
Boys things.
Water Boys.
And it
Oh,
was
they
pretty
were a
cool.
band. Oh, I wonder who was that.
Yeah,
Might have been
maybe
Glenn
somebody
Hansen.
Oh, they were playing the
They were
Water Boys.
playing.
They were
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
Water Boys tunes. Remember they did Fisherman's Blues, and they also did the Water Boys version of Sweet Thing.
Yeah. It could have been the Frames and Glenn Hansen. They used to busk around that time, didn't they?
And so did I, though.
Oh, you did actually?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of you, Dave. Actually,
Yeah.
You were playing
Yeah.
Pearl Jam and-
I know I know that we played Fisherman's Blues, though.
It could have been.
Michael,
maybe.
say a few more details. Maybe we'll find out that it was
Well, I was
definitely
totally
Dave.
into these kids. They're all,
Yeah.
it was, so they all had the requisite paisley shirts and fisherman caps.
Oh, okay. Dave, is that
I
you?
wasn't. I had a paisley shirt. I didn't have a fisherman's cap.
No.
As far as I
I
remember.
don't know.
do now,
I don't
though.
know if the kids
Several.
singing. I mean, I don't know. They weren't all wearing the caps, but there was one kid I remember in particular wearing the cap.
Okay.
But it was a cool thing. And I also, that was part of that story. That was also the only Black person I saw in my whole trip to Ireland was busking as well. And he did this really great version of Scarborough Fair.
Oh,
Yeah. Do you know he still is busking?
Yeah.
Is he?
I know that guy.
I know the guy you're
It
talking
was
about.
great. And I tried
Yeah.
for years to recapture whatever his arrangement was, because it was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
anyway,
know the guy.
And that's the first story. So maybe it was you.
That's a good
Yeah,
one because they
you
had
know what?
two
The second
connections.
story goes
A lot
back.
of people busked. A lot of people played Fisherman's Blues. I don't remember Sweet Thing, the Van Morrison tune.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I don't remember playing that, but maybe it was a long time ago, obviously.
it was a long time ago. It was 34 years ago.
Right? Yeah. Well, 30. Do you know what? Yeah.
Were
I
you
wouldn't
even
have-
alive, Dave? Were you?
No, I
even
was. Yeah, I was
alive?
very much alive, but I wonder what was busking. Anyway, look, sure.
Never mind.
I guess it doesn't matter.
So yeah, but still, it's I mean, it's
could
really
have been-
a
it
wonderful
could have-
experience, because that's what we're here to talk about in a way. And now, those of you listeners, we're here today to interview Louise and Dave Holden of the really fine band I Draw Slow. And I discovered I Draw Slow, as I discover most music, through my wife. And she's a giant fan, and she told me I can't embarrass, her. So Bonnie, I'm trying my
Shame,
best.
so she's right.
Trying my
How
best
did-
here.
How did Bonnie discover them, Michael?
Well, you know what? Through our whole marriage, we've been married over 30 years now, and she likes to listen to music while she's cooking.
Okay.
And
do we all,
so,
yeah.
but years ago, it was listening to CDs, and that's how I discovered somebody who's one of my best friends now, Therese Schroeder-Schieker, Bonnie was listening to a CD and Therese shows up and I said, that's a beautiful song. Then years later, she gets a hold of me and we become friends. But so this is maybe 3 or 4 years ago. She was listening to something, and I'm always, usually when she's cooking, I'm in my office writing or whatever. And I heard something she was listening to, and I get up and I go, what's that? And she said, yeah, the guy plays like you, doesn't he? And it was the I Draw Slow tune, My Portion, which is a lovely song, and which it drew me in. And then I got to see more about these guys. What else do they do? And so I started digging deeper into the catalog, and then I'd go from, well, that's my favorite song. No, I think Swans is my favorite song. No, Swans is not my favorite song. Well, it is my favorite song, but I like this one too. And I kept going through all these tunes you guys do, and it's just that what you do is so. And I have to. And I'm a songwriter and musician from the time I was a teenager, and even though I left the music business when I was 26, they keep pulling me back in. Right. So I always end up doing sessions or joining a band for a little while. But I'm acutely interested in, even though when I started out in the music business, I was basically we were a cross between Alice Cooper and the MC5, but I've always had this folk music, folk rock kind of core to what I think is music, right? And so when I hear music like that, I'm really, it's intriguing to me, and to me it's the most alive kind of music. And what I found in your music is this not only great musicianship, and you can tell, and that the five of you have been playing together for a while. I mean, the music is so tight and it's so well arranged, and great musicianship, and very tasteful. Nobody ever overdoes it, which is the problem I found with finding fiddle players. They always wanted to be Jean-Luc Ponty in the middle of a folk tune.
Yeah.
But it's gorgeous, and I think when I've been meditating on your music this week, I think what's really striking to me is two things in particular, even above the musicianship, is the lyrics, which are often so poetic. And I'm I'm a doctor in English literature, so I know what I'm talking about. So poetic and so beautiful, and the melodies are so inventive. I mean, your melodies, it seems like there's like one foot in a kind of a traditional idiom, but you take these flights into places where I never expected to go, and I'm like, this just went to 11 right here. So it really did. I mean, so welcome to the show, David.
Well,
I'm glad we came.
I'm very happy we're here now. Yes, exactly. I was feeling pretty bad about myself about 10 minutes ago, but
that's right. That's why God put me on the planet. But anyway, so and now you are brother and sister. So I wonder if you could start off by telling us kind of your musical journey. Right, I told you a little bit of mine, but I'd like to hear yours. How'd you get to here from wherever you began?
It was circuitous for sure, because we started out, well, no, we've probably come full circle. Dave and I, when we were very young, like teenagers, we used to kind of write together a bit. And Dave was always a big fan of folk music from quite early and was listening to Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and so on. I was more into The Cure and the Smiths, and not quite so folky, but he brought me around, and we were writing in that genre. But then we went on a whole other tip where we got into funk and jazz and soul, and we had a band for a number of years called Tabula Rasa, which was acid jazz, which you might remember was very big in the 90s.
I've never heard of it. That's great.
It was in Europe. I don't know if it was big in America.
But it was underground in America for sure.
Okay. Yeah. It was very big over here.
Oh yeah, that was our thing. And then what happened then?
What happened then? So we kind of stayed on that for years, and we were playing that kind of music. And then I went to Australia traveling, and I busked over there for a good bit. And while I was busking, while I was over there, I met a guy who played the banjo, and I started busking with him because I was just interested. I'd never heard it played like that before. We'd have kind of Irish tenor banjo over here, but more like, the Dubliners and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Jerry O'Connor and people. But I'd nery heard the kind of 5-string banjo played, and I just thought it was fairly fascinating. But like I said, I found it kind of funny, more funny at the time than actually artistically interesting, if you know what I mean. But anyway, he kind of took me under his wing, and we started busking for a good few months. And then when I came back, I was kind of like got a few other people, because I was playing in a few different bands, and we started doing that. And then so we started this other band that we were playing, which was kind of playing traditional bluegrass and old time and Cajun and stuff like that. And so then slowly myself and my sister started writing in that kind of idiom, because we just, especially one of the things, just like you were talking about earlier, from years in kind of jazz funk bands and all that kind of thing, where it was basically about how many chords you could fit in the song rather than whether they worked. I kind of sort of reacted against that, because I realized that it was never the music I was listening to, you know. And then when you go back to when you realize what you're listening to, you know, most of the time it's 3 chords, and it's the same 3 chords. And we started writing in that, and, you know, like the idea of storytelling, you know, like the idea of, you know, just keeping it simple, but very much like you say, kind of traditional, but then with a kind of a sensibility of kind of modern as well, and trying to get the music to do different things with those instruments. That was kind of it. That's where we are now. So I Draw Slow's been going probably for about 15 years now.
Really?
Which is not that long, given that, you know, I'm 50.
Yeah.
So we did move around a fair bit before we landed on I Draw Slow. And I think having worked in jazz and sung in jazz and funk and soul, it does inform what we do now. It might not be that obvious, but for me it is. It's in there, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting, you know. So I've in my blog, when I switched from doing a blog to doing Substack, one of my readers said, "I hope you can still share all those folk tunes you always share," because I don't know if Substack will let you do that. Well, they do. And so what? As far as the music you're playing now, what were your influences? I mean, I have guesses at your influences, but what were they? Because I with my own experience, right? So sometimes it was not for years later that I realized who was really influencing me.
Yeah, completely. It can take a while, and you don't notice it at the time sometimes, because if you're listening to something all the time, and you know, we write in kind of patches. So, you know, we're at this stage from doing it, you know, we released our 5th album there last September, and that was one of those, you know, pandemic albums, and we put a lot into it because we weren't doing anything else, you know what I mean? It's not that we don't, but we kind of went to the studio, and we were putting loads of different creative ideas and all this kind of thing. And like we're now in we just started writing again really in the last couple of weeks. We kind of just decided, you know, because we realized that what's always kind of slightly makes us happy is when we're doing that kind of thing. You don't realize until you're not doing it that's kind of the whole point. And whatever you're listening to at that time,
it's going to influence, sure,
it's just there, and you don't even really notice it. I mean, there are times when people have pointed things out. I remember a song that we did. It was same old dress. Yeah. And afterwards, I remember someone came up to me. We were playing at a gig years later, and I hadn't listened. Someone came up afterwards and said to me, going, "Are you listening to a lot of Elliott Smith right now?" And I was going, "No, but I was about a year ago." And you know what I mean? And then it goes going, "Oh yeah, okay, maybe." You know what I mean? And it does. Those kind of things filter in without you even noticing. Mm-hmm. So I guess that, you know, for the last, you know, we've always been influenced. You know, when we started off, we're always kind of keen. It's funny because we're trying to get back to the same blueprint. But when we started off, we were kind of like, you know, we wanted to write like Simon and Garfunkel if they were like an old time band.
Yeah.
You know, if they were like an old time, we're like, wait, how come nobody does that? It's funny. There's quite a lot of them now, not a lot of them, but people who follow that kind of Simon.
Well, kind of, Milk Carton Kids and
that
Bar
kind of
Brothers and that kind
duo.
of yeah,
kind of
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
And we kind of started to do that, and then we, as we were getting into, we were kind of listening to bluegrass and stuff, and then we went more towards the kind of old time and the fiddle and the traditional stuff and the kind of Appalachian stuff, and we started to become friends with people like Dirk Powell and the Foghorn String Band and all that kind of stuff, who visit Ireland quite a lot. In fact, they're all over here this week. And we got quite influenced by their sound, just that very, very traditional 5 people. We were kind of like, if you listen to that kind of music, 5 people sitting down around one mic, which was how we recorded the first couple of albums, and playing old time, but with songs, and then songs that would kind of go off in interesting directions. So I mean, the influences have always been that kind of Appalachian to a point, but it was more, we were a bit more stringent, is that the word, about it at the start, regimented, that it had to be old time and then we'd go like this. Whereas now we're more, we've kind of evolved, and I suppose what's interesting over the years is that we've evolved into this thing, and I don't know if we're the best people to tell you what it is, because it's just what we do now. We can't really, we write a bunch of songs that are whatever we're listening to, and then but we do happen to have a banjo and a fiddle and a guitar and 2 voices and a double bass, and that's just kind of the way it is. But I mean, for the last album, we were listening to like Ethiopian music and like loads of Ravel. Remember that was a big thing. Loads of Love. That band Love, Forever Changes, that album, and loads of we for the last album we were kind of like, we want to make an album that sounds kind of like 60s, that kind of 60s pop, but with folk. That was our plan with that.
Right. And I saw one of the reviews I saw of that, they were comparing, and the album is self-titled, right? It's I Draw Slow, the album. But I saw somebody comparing it to the Laurel Canyon kinds of sound, right? Which I see that. I mean, that's I don't know if you saw that documentary they made about that.
I did, yeah. It was great.
Yeah, and my wife and I watched it. It was like, wow, this is all the bands we loved when we were kids. Right?
What was the documentary? What was the title, Michael?
It was band, like Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and that whole scene.
Yeah, it's done by Bob Dylan's son, wasn't it?
Right.
But what was the name of the documentary?
Oh,
it was Bob Dylan's son did it, I think.
Oh, okay.
Bob Dylan's son.
I can look it up.
Jacob
okay.
Dylan,
I thought
Tom
you said
Petty's
Bob Dylan's song.
Jacob Dylan, yeah.
Tom Petty's in it before he died. Playing.
Okay. Again, like you guys said that you don't often know what other people are hearing. You're all musicians. Yes. I'm not. My wife's a piano teacher. I listen to a fair amount of music, but not even a. But so Michael mentioned the self-titled album. The reviewers, I listened to a lot of you guys this week, but the reviewers, to echo what Michael said, it's so funny that to an outsider, they're saying you can listen to a whole show and they might not make a mistake. So when they're saying you guys are tight, that's pretty high, right? And then,
well, that's right.
I missed that one, honestly.
Yeah, and then, I'll find it. And then the other one is when you mentioned like COVID had you all doing your own things, you come back, but the reviewers are saying, and I don't know your body of work that well to say, you came back with something to say regarding that too. You came back, some reviewers would say, kind of a dark stream. And I know you're on a podcast called the Regeneration Podcast, and Michael and I'll talk about everything from gardening to I work for the Catholic Church, and boy, that needs a regeneration from the bottom up. Tabula rasa, burn the whole thing down.
Start again.
We talk a lot about the struggles of young people after COVID. I work at a college. The mental health crisis comes up a lot. But you even had, I don't think it was on your album title, but you had a George Orwell quote coming, with your self-titled album. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know that interests me tremendously. What was your experience? How did you guys define it? What did you do about it musically and even in your lyrics and the connection to, say, George Orwell and others?
Well, just on that, the COVID side of it, the lockdown side of it. So I suppose what an awful lot of people did over that time was because we were home, people got quite insular and probably quite ruminative. And there's a song on the album called Crosses. And the idea for that came from, you know, for a time here in Dublin, we couldn't get outside a 2-kilometre radius of our houses. We weren't allowed. So for months, you were just seeing the same things all the time. And there's a route that I would take in the morning with the dog. And I pass one of these little road crosses, you know, where if somebody dies and they put a cross on the road, for this girl called Juliet, who jumped off a bridge, didn't jump off a bridge. Sorry, she fell off a bridge, back 30 years ago. And I passed this every day and noticed it every day. And so I was having the same thought. And from a mental health point of view, when you're not getting a lot of stimulation from outside and you're having the same circular thoughts all the time, it can be very corrosive. And so that's why I suppose it's very important for human beings to break out of that, both geographically but also psychologically. And seeing that cross every morning, it would tip me into a frame of mind, a very sad frame of mind, appropriately given the circumstances. But yeah, absolutely. But it got me to thinking about how when you're moving through your life in familiar spaces and you're constantly being reminded of maybe negative things that have happened because the geography reminds you of that and tips your thinking back into negative places again and again and again, and it can become a spiral. And I think maybe for a lot of people during lockdown, they might have experienced that because they didn't really get an opportunity to break out and have new patterns of thinking. So that was one of the themes lyrically that I tried to explore through that song Crosses, that idea of being geographically in the same loop and also psychologically.
Yeah. Wow. And I see that also in your song, Bring Out Your Dead, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's a darkness permeating some of those lyrics, which is appropriate. I mean, it's cathartic, right? And because I saw the same thing, I am a father of 9 children, and the last 4
single-handedly regenerating.
But it was rough on those kids. and I'm a college professor, and man, I've never
You're a super breeder. That's what they're called.
I'm a super breeder. That's right.
I was reading about this today.
I'm a super breeder. The world must be peopled. Right.
Well, congratulations.
I'm fighting demographic winter all by myself. Yeah. With the help of my wife.
Yes.
But
with a shout out to my wife. A little shout out to Bonnie here.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is that I saw how hard it was on the young people around me. And I know it was hard on me, but it was easy for a grown-up to push it off a little bit. But I saw such turmoil and fear in the young people around, even a couple of my own children, but especially in the students in college, who they're in masks and they're confined to their class, into their dorms. They can't leave any, and it's just it was insane. And once the masks finally came off, they all came back to life. And a couple of them was teaching a course on romanticism, and a couple of the women in the class said, yeah, we just lived through this and we're not doing this again. We want to live, you know? Yeah. But I think it's important, and I think it's interesting in your most recent album that you took a lot of departures, not just in terms of subject matter and a little bit of the sound, but also in your approach to recording. Because I think and you have a drummer.
Yeah, well, some of that was to do with the fact that for the first time we felt we weren't allowed, because we were saying before, it was very, very strict lockdown here. So we weren't allowed to be together in the studio. Do you know what I mean? You were allowed to go into the studio because you could sit the only way people could meet, work with the group was to say that it was in broadcasting. So we had to kind of get around it by saying, did we say we were making a documentary or something?
Right.
Yeah. So we had
to film everything.
To legitimize being there. And we had to keep, all the musicians couldn't actually meet up. So we didn't get to rehearse with the band like we normally did, which was bad and good because it kind of freed us up, because we didn't really need them to kind of look at everything just from a kind of a sort of a folk all together playing at the same time thing. We were like, what if we had horns there? We could record at different times, because we had to record at different times because we couldn't be in the same room together. Well, we couldn't, but we did in certain things. But the drummer was in a different room. We were all separated. things like that. So, we recorded the horns and strings at a different time in a different studio. And so that kind of lent itself to it. So it added a different kind of aspect to the recording. So in one way it was kind of restrictive, but another way it was kind of the opposite of restrictive.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of liberating sometimes, because you get used to doing something in one way.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of the lockdown, we had 3 kind of big, I know no one wants to hear about COVID, but like we had 3 big lockdowns, and the first one was really cool. We were just talking about, it was really sunny here, which it never is. And everyone was just outside barbecuing, and we kind of stayed in the area, and it's okay, and you get to hang out with your family the whole time and blah, blah, blah. And then the second one was in winter, and that was just awful. But we were recording the album at the time, so it kind of kept us sane. And then the album just took longer and longer and longer to get out, and the record company kept putting off releasing it and all this kind of thing. And the whole, then, as with everybody, then the whole pandemic stopped being a novelty and then just became this absolute kind of chore on things. But it did make you look at things differently, and I think it stuck with a lot of people. People are still changing their lives.
And certainly, again, like in terms of the music, when we were touring, a lot of our songwriting would be influenced by the touring, because we'd be in places, particularly in the States, and we would hear musicians play, and we would see particular landscapes, and we would hear stories, and we come back full of all these ideas.
Right.
We didn't have any of that input for 2 years. We didn't tour. So, we both live in suburban Dublin. I mean, it's lovely, but it's not the Rockies, you know what I mean?
No.
And so trying to come up with, you just almost everything. I think everything about the music was influenced by that. It was just all had to be much more insular. We had to dredge it up from inside rather than stimulus from the outside.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm glad you mentioned touring in the States, because usually, from what I can tell, you tour on, you could call the kind of the bluegrass folk circuit, right? Which are mostly festivals, like during Merle Fest. Is it next week, a week after?
Next week,
weekend, yeah.
Next weekend.
Which is beautiful. But those are, that's a beautiful kind of venue.
Where's that
People
one?
haven't been
Where's
to
that
those kind of,
festival?
to North Carolina, right?
Okay.
Yep.
But what happens at those festivals, it's a family atmosphere. It's hospitable to families being there, and it really becomes a kind of community where there's a lot of picking between each other. I mean, I used to go to these when I was 18. I was almost enlisted in Bill Crabtree and his Cherry Blossoms to be their lead singer and guitar player, but I was not really a bluegrass guy, so I reneged. But that's a wonderful thing, and for me, going to those festivals as 18-year-old, it opened up my ideas about what music could be.
Yeah.
And I saw so many great either traditional like bluegrass bands like Bill Monroe. Not did I see Bill Monroe? No, I saw Jimmy Martin, but I also saw David Grisman. And when he had Stefan Grappelli, who was 90 almost. So I'm seeing all this stuff and people feeding off each other, and I can imagine going from that kind of atmosphere to this, the insular kind of thing, which
there in four walls,
and I think it shows in the music. It's a very different record from your earlier records, for sure, right?
It is,
And so, what are you writing now? Where's your head now?
We're writing. We're going back to brass tacks. What we're writing at the moment, we're literally not thinking about brass tacks. We're not thinking about anything other than guitar and vocals at the moment, and trying to write something quite simple and not to do the thing that we often do, where we write something, go, that's a bit too simple. Why don't we see if we can muss it up a bit?
I mean, we've developed these, for whatever everybody, it's philosophies about songwriting over the years, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. It's just what we do, and it's what we kind of is that first of all, never be afraid of something because it's too simple, and if it sounds good, then it is good. And the main thing is you always got to write something that sounds good to you. You can't ever think about anybody else. It has to be something that you want to listen to. It was the first thing that one of the reasons we started the band in the first place was just like, it was a need to hear something that we didn't think we were hearing. It's not that we're saying we're the most original band in the world, but there was stuff out there where, like, you know, you'd go, why don't they just do this? Why do they have to keep doing that? And they go, well, we're just going to do it ourselves. You know what I mean? Now, that's probably, it's, and I don't mean to sound arrogant. It's not like that.
Yes,
it was
true.
just like kind of a need. It was like to scratch an itch, you know?
Yeah. Well, actually, do you know, Gillian Welch said something similar. I remember reading an interview with her, and she said about her songwriting, she said, yeah, there was just stuff I wanted to hear on the radio and I wasn't hearing it. So I said, I'm going to write it.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. I always tell like young writers and musicians, that's the Holy Spirit telling you it's your job, right? True.
But it's also, it's like the little places share the grand design. The difference between, let's say I'm a teenager, and there's I think a universe between a teenager who says I'm just trying to be different and the teenager who says I'm trying to be myself, right? So when you just try to be different, you might have some success for a little while, but eventually everybody's going to look like you. But you know, the much harder journey, and it sounds like this was your evolution too, especially when you said, I wanted to write things that I like. That's the same thing. Writers would certainly find that same thing, from the most personal to the most universal, really, right? But that's a struggle everybody's going to have. But right now, it seems like there's very few people who are doing what you do, to go and just be the most personal. Everybody's trying to be different. Ergo, everybody sounds the same, you know, and everybody's certainly an exaggeration, but I'm thinking of something I know better, like writing, you know?
Here's a question. Now, by the way, which of you is the elder?
Yeah, I'm curious too.
You are, okay.
Yes.
And at some point, tell us a little bit about your relationship. I get along with my brothers and sisters. I got one brother, one sister. We could never do what you're doing. My sister did the logo for the regeneration thing, but it was like pulling teeth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's very artsy, but I have to write her. It's all through emails.
There's 2 years between us, and I think a few years ago tried doing something with my brother. We have one other brother, and that didn't work at all. So it was just
he's a great musician.
He is.
Just very different style.
Yeah. But I guess we as I say, we've just kind of developed a way to do it. We're very good at, I don't know if we're very good at it, but we're very good at compartmentalizing it. Like, we live quite close to each other. When we're with each other and we're doing band stuff, we talk about the band. But when we're not doing stuff with the band, we don't really talk about the band. Yeah. It kind of can come up, but, you know, after, you know, years and years of doing it, there's there's definitely an ease to it. We've always got on. We've always been very close. So it's not there's no kind of friction there. Like, that's easy enough. We have a way of doing things. You know, we could probably be a lot more proactive. Maybe if we were doing it as much as we should have been doing, maybe it would have gone worse. But we tend to, like, you know, we've always been very much, you know, we don't do this full time. We try and you know, we get away to tour in the States. You know, before the pandemic, we're kind of getting up and running again. We were going over about 3 or 4 times a year. We've a few this year, but we were previously doing it just kind of over the holiday periods because our bass player is a secondary school teacher, and that's the way it was working. Now we're going over a bit more using musicians over there as well. But sorry, I'm digressing in the wrong direction.
Yeah, you're not
answering
the question.
But it's all fascinating. But it's fascinating.
That was your opportunity.
Yeah. I'm supposed to be saying how it's just she's making the whole thing easy. I keep flying off the handle. She's like, "Oh, I'll just deal with him."
No. You mentioned your brother is a musician as well. Now, do you come from a musical family?
Well, we do now, but not before that. Yeah. My parents are
they're big fans of music.
They like music. But they don't. They don't tend to. We did look it up there recently, and I think we found somebody who was in the army band in Dublin, a Holden,
right
back a couple of generations, and I think there's not that many Holdens in Ireland, and the name is from Kilkenny, and it looked like it was, but other than that, my parents wouldn't be that musical. They're not unmusical, but they're not. They don't have, like, it was funny, like, because our brother lives in Austin in Texas. It's been there for about 10 years. And for us, it's just what we've always done. We just don't. There isn't really an option
Right.
No.
not to do it.
How did you pick it up then?
We were always very into, listening to music. I suppose everybody is when you're that age, but we were pretty passionate about it. Lou got a guitar. She started showing me a couple of things. I got into it. You were always into singing in school and stuff like that. I was just got mad into guitar and then just was joining bands in school. And I just have always been playing in bands really since I've been about 14 years old.
Yeah. And I suppose from my perspective, I always loved to sing, but a bit like yourself, I come from an English background. I did my undergraduate degree in English, and I've always written a lot. I've always written poetry and short stories and plays and different things. But once I got into lyric writing, I realized, okay, this is the discipline I really enjoy for writing, because it's that discipline. It's like there's a shape that you have got to fill the shape. It can't just go off. You can't go outside the lines. Right. It needs to work with the music. It has to work with the music. It has to work rhythmically. And in a weird way, like on the lyric writing side, you mentioned grand designs earlier on. I often do feel like I don't believe this. It's not a credo, but it does kind of guide passively the way that I write. I always feel there is a solution. It's like the song is already out there. We have to just find it.
Right.
Yeah. We always say that when we're trying to make it musically and lyrically. It's very like I don't want to sound too grandiose about the whole thing, but it's like sculpting.
Yeah.
And there's a block and the thing's in there and you're trying to chip away the bits till you get to it. Now, I'm not sure that we've ever, success in terms of us in a song is not how well it does and stuff. It's always like when you're like, okay, that works. And, I can never really tell that till a couple of years afterwards, because it's very hard, because you got to be very, very ruthless in what you cut away and what you leave off. And,
we've jettisoned a lot of songs over the years.
We have an awful lot of songs. And it is that kind of idea of just getting a nice melody, and then you might have some bit that's going into something really cool. And or for instance, you've written a verse and we're just like, we just can't go there. There's just no room for it, and blah, blah, blah. And we've got better at throwing those bits out, and we've got better at not what I personally like to do when we start getting into writing again is just be a little easy on yourself and go into it and go, especially at the start, because we're always saying it's very like a muscle. If you don't do it a lot, it's not going to be good. You have to do it a bunch of times. So when you start again, you have to be prepared. It's where most people fall off. It's why most people don't, because if you enjoy writing songs and you write songs, it's because you have to write songs. It's not because you're doing it for some other reason. It's just because it's something that you have to do. And we're long enough now doing it now that what we get back into it, you need to write 5 or 6 bad songs. Just throw them out and then keep going. And then at that stage you just go, and whether they're bad or not, you might still like them or stuff like that. But that's, to me, what it is, because without getting too much into it, although that seems to be what you want, it's you're never happier than when you're the key to happy life, I think, is you need to be kind of working out some puzzle in your head constantly.
Need something on the boil. You
know what I mean? Otherwise you start looking inward, and if you're going around when you finish a song, it's almost a little bit sad, because that's it and that's there, where it's nice to just have it sitting there and the possibilities of it being this this really nice little thing that's there. So that's what keeps, like, as soon as we started writing again, I had a little bit of a lift, because you're just kind of thinking about it and you're going, okay, this and blah blah blah, and there's fragments of bits of songs in your head that you're working on, and you don't know what they are.
I think what you said about to live a happy life. First of all, you're both authentic witnesses to a happy life, and that's few and far. And then when you said the key to happy life is always trying to be figuring something out in your head, that's a takeaway, and I'm very grateful for that. And it almost makes me think too that we had mentioned, and I'm not trying to bring us back to COVID in any way, shape, or form. I'm serious, but I'm always trying to figure out. People ask me, students and my wife, I'm just trying to figure out like what's going on. In one sense, like at a cosmic level, like, where are you? That's the first line, and that God says to Adam in Genesis, like, where are you? I don't think I've ever gotten beyond that question. Like, and so I wake up in the morning and people wonder, because a lot of what I think is going on is very dark, but I have a pretty cheerful disposition. And you probably helped me describe it to other people, that I'm always trying to figure something out in my head. And if the way I'm connecting it involves like people doing bad things to other people, I'm not happy about that. But I've lived a very happy life because I wake up every morning interested in something,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have an interest, and whatever it is, I think, that's what keeps people focused. It could be anything.
And one other question to an outsider, and Michael, you would have your own artistic process, but you had mentioned, like, you're writing and you write enough for an album. Very heroic that if you say you write 5 bad songs till you get back into it. If you're writing an album and you're, the mojo is working and you finish, do you just keep going, or do you just lay it down and know that when you pick it up again, it just takes a while to get those muscles working?
Yeah, well, I mean, you see, there's a kind of there's a process to it when you're doing an album where you start writing songs, they slowly form. Usually, not for the last album previously, you'd kind of tour the song, some of the newer ones, and then you'd start thinking about rehearsing. Then you'd start going into the studio. You play them over and over and over again. You do that, and you've stopped writing at that point because you can't keep writing while you're trying to record. It just doesn't work. Yeah. And then your head's in that kind of more technical stage. And by the end of that, you definitely don't feel like writing for a little while. I find, and
that
then
helps
you
a lot.
You kind of stop.
Self-evident to you, Michael. I'm sure you've had that. Music recording is different than writing for that technical piece, but the technical piece would be editing. I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And it's exhausting recording.
It's exhausting.
It's not very pleasant, to be honest.
No, I don't enjoy that at all.
The early parts, it's good, the planning and all the rest, and the mixing can be fun, but like I would defy anybody to say that they're completely happy with anything they've created.
It's made easier for you guys because you don't make mistakes, according to the reviewer.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the biggest shock to my system when we were.
By the way, we're not saying that we don't make mistakes.
No, I saw it. I read it. Yeah, I trust this guy. You guys don't make mistakes.
But anyway,
I make plenty of mistakes. I've made about
18
mistakes
and I went into the studio for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked at what a drag it is.
Mm.
All this waiting around.
Yeah, you would think it would be exciting if you're.
But by the time you get to record, I just want to go home. But
it's very hard to keep the energy up, and also when you're writing the song, everything is in your control. When you're recording the song, it feels like nothing is in your control anymore, and you have this idea in your head about where you want it to go, but getting there can just seem like, I don't know, very very tough.
Now, have you produced your own albums?
The last album, we kind of would semi-produce the albums. The last album, our fiddle player is a very competent studio wizard. So we went up to a studio up in the Dublin Mountains and did it up there. And he essentially engineered it, and then we kind of produced it together.
It's Adrian Hart.
Adrian Hart, yeah. So we generally do, we kind of know what sound we want. I mean, you see the previous albums, a lot of them were just like, we would record them live, so we'd go in, and if we're using an engineer, we'd know exactly what we wanted it to sound like. Mm-hmm. But again, it's always that we're always chasing that particular sound. I mean, a lot of it, we when you record separately, you have a lot more control over that. But the kind of you can miss out on some of that kind of live energy sometimes, like that.
And it's very true. I mean, so for instance, your song "Swans." And the video is fantastic, by the way. And by the way, I've been sitting all week, how's he playing that? I'll take off the guitar and I'll start copying your licks. But now that was recorded live, right?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
But it wasn't recorded live for the video. It couldn't have been.
It was.
Yeah.
Was it really? How'd you pull that off?
We had it basically that was directed by
Hugh
O'Connor, a friend of ours who's quite a well-known actor here and director. And
is that the Game of Thrones guy?
No, that's Aidan Gillen. No, Hugh O'Connor was in a movie called. Did you ever see a movie called My Left Foot?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
Daniel
I just
Day-Lewis
watched it
and-
again recently.
I saw it within the
He's-
last 2 months. Yeah.
Who's he
Oh
playing?
yeah, he plays the child. He
He's
plays
the
young-
child.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
He's the
Oh,
young.
yeah.
He was
That's a
also in
tough role.
Chocolat. And
he's in
Okay.
Chocolat and Three Musketeers, and yeah, you know him as an adult too. He's been in,
Yeah.
he's been in a
But
bunch.
but he
Okay.
doesn't act as much anymore. He more
Yeah.
directs and stuff like that. Anyway, but he had a sound guy that he often uses called Hugh. Somebody. It was a number of years ago, that video now.
Mhm.
But they had little clip-on mics, and they put a lot of work.
That's how
in
they,
sound.
because I was watching, where the microphones are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're there. And I suppose the hard part was all the motion, like we were kind of
Yeah.
climbing over,
It's not
roots.
easy to play the guitar and walk up a hill at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
It was easier back then because it was 10 years ago. I probably couldn't do it now.
Can I ask you a question about if the basic thing to an outsider, they're going to say, that I Draw Slow, one of their geniuses, and there's many, is this kind of blend between kind of a Celtic tradition and Appalachian. And Michael and I, a big part of the show is reconnecting to the land. Mike's a farmer, reconnecting to our bodies. This whole notion that we see ourselves as computers. The whole left brain aspect of the world, the technocracy and so forth. Do you think so? There's Celtic music traditions and Appalachian music traditions. Do you think your music has been influenced directly, especially on this side of the pond in Appalachia? What is your connection to those cities? We might say Nashville in particular. And do you think you've been influenced by the land itself, or really just the music that comes, that preceded you? Some of these roots you picked from the music, or tell us a little bit about what you found between the Celtic tradition and the traditions you found here in the East Coast of the U.S., in the mountains and so forth.
I mean, the funny thing is, and I know it sounds weird, is that we feel a bit more informed, is that the word, about the Appalachian than we do about the Irish. And it's not that we'd listened to a lot of Irish music. We've never really played it professionally. You would play it, in bits and things here and there.
Sing songs in the pub, yeah.
But not so much professionally. Adrian has the fiddle player, but he's from England. So
Yeah.
he's not actually. But he wouldn't like you saying that.
Yeah.
But we have so when we first went over, when we first put out the got signed up to the label Pine Castle and went over, we were off to go over to North Carolina and then down to Nashville. I mean, for us, that was like, it was like, I don't know, it was like being mad into Western movies, and then someone going, come over here and direct a Western in, Arizona or whatever.
Well, Italy probably.
Yeah. But the point, like, it was absolutely incredible, and it does. So there's particular parts of America that we keep going back to. North Carolina being one of them. We've been there a bunch of. Where are you guys based, by the way?
North of Lancaster County. So I live in Western New York, south of Rochester, a little east of Buffalo. The Finger Lakes region, it's called. The Finger Lakes region.
Yeah.
So the Grassroots Festival would be big there.
I'm in Michigan.
That's right. Yeah. Which?
Yeah, I'm in Michigan near Ann Arbor.
Michigan.
What's your big, Michael? What would be your big folk festival? I mentioned the Grassroots Festival in Ithaca.
Oh, well, there's a big folk. Well, I shouldn't say big. There's a folk venue in Ann Arbor called the Ark. I don't know if you played there.
Yeah, I do. Actually, do you know what? We were supposed to be there last January.
Oh,
we had a tour, semi-booked in around the Midwest. That's the Midwest, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, around the Midwest, and we were going to be going to Ann Arbor and a couple of different places. We've played in Ithaca a few times.
Okay, I would think you'd be a hit there. Ithaca's
That's
about an
great
hour and a half
spot.
from me. Yeah.
And we've also played, is it Grey-Fox? Is that near enough to there a few times? That's
do you know the city associated with?
Oak Hill. It's up near. Is it near enough? Not too far from Woodstock, is it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. It is.
Great
Yep.
Fox, yeah. Mhm.
Grey-Fox. It's in Oak
Grey
Hill,
Fox.
which is near to. I don't
It's
know,
kind of
but we've all,
it's the Hudson River, Catskills region of New York.
Yes.
Catskills.
Yeah. And then we've also what's that cool venue that we played in a couple of times? Cafe Lena, is it?
Yeah.
In what's the name of that
It's not in
town?
Buffalo, is it?
It's not in Buffalo. It's near Buffalo though. Darn, I can't remember.
Cafe Lena, Lina.
Lena.
Lena. It's a very kind of historic folk of the kind of folk boom in the 60s. It's the only one of those coffee houses still around. It's in, oh my God,
Saratoga Springs.
Saratoga.
I know it very well. Yeah, I've never been to that venue. I know it very well. Sure. Yeah, you're close by.
Dylan
I'll be able to.
there.
I'll be able to catch you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that
all of those venues are quite close to me in one sense. Or I have friends that live in right. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
But like, just to get back to your question.
Yeah.
When we first started going to the States, we were very influenced by the sort of the feedback loop of the music that we were writing, and then going to the place, where that had influenced it. But really, in terms of the land influencing our writing, that happened, more with a lot more clarity when we went to New Mexico, Colorado, because those landscapes were so dramatically different from anything that we had experienced either here in Ireland or in the East Coast of the States. And we did kind of get thrown for a loop when we saw those landscapes, and we briefly culturally appropriated for this particular song called Maria. It's on our fourth album.
Maria, okay.
Yeah, and that was very much, we looked at that landscape and said, okay, we have to write for how we're feeling right now. Landscape.
Yeah, because I mean, like the Appalachians are beautiful and the East Coast is beautiful, but it's quite Irish in feel, some of it.
Very green.
But like when
Irish,
yeah, but the desert is like, it's like the complete polar opposite. It's the complete opposite of Ireland. It's just like you're sitting there, where's you going? Well, I remember going there and I was just going, I've never seen anything like this. It's just and the people are so different. The whole Irish thing doesn't matter in a good way, because we get when you go further west, that whole, when you're anywhere in the East, and I know the Midwest as well, and all that thing, Ireland just chimes with everybody. They just say Ireland. But further west you go, the less people care, and it's kind of, for us, it was kind of a little.
That's funny.
Almost refreshing.
It got us out of the Irish culture thing and into something very, very different. Yeah. And even, you mentioned that song, My Portion, like the brass that we used on that towards the end, that sort of slightly mariachi almost. Yeah. Like that all came out of that landscape.
New Mexican, Colorado. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, when I first heard it, by the way, tell your record company it was not the new album that you first introduced brass on. I think it says that in the promotion.
No, it was not.
Wait a minute.
No. And they released that album too, so you think they know.
It was Turn Your Face to the Sun, and that album was written after we'd spent quite a bit of time in New Mexico and in Taos in particular, beautiful part of the world, and all around Colorado.
Yeah. So when in winding down, I'm just interested in seeing. Now you two write most of the songs for the band. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. All of them, yeah.
All of them. So what's your process at writing songs? What is your process at writing songs?
Generally speaking, Dave will have a melody idea and a guitar idea, and often a lyric, and then we'll get together and we'll have a listen to it, and then I'll take it away and have a think about it and start thinking thematically about how we might grow from that lyric. Like often you have a line, and that line very often is the one, because it will you think very rhythmically, so you will have a line that sits perfectly where it's supposed to sit. So, but it's great for me because it gives me the germ, and then I can kind of grow the story around that. And then we come back and we look at arrangements and we try different things, and
and we kind of we'll have a few different ones. We'll basically keep a couple of pots boiling, and we'll try and go, and because you don't really know where they're kind of gonna go. Like, there was, for instance, like last week we got together again. There was a song from, and this one had been around for a while, but it was just basically, it had it's something I wrote ages ago, but it just I like everyone else, all my songs are on my iPhone, the kind of memos thing, and I have a 12-year-old daughter who last year had one of those little light touch things, like not the phones, but the kind of the music player ones, but it has apps and stuff like that. And she went in, she was sharing the same thing and deleted about 1,000 voice memos going back probably 15, 20 of all various songs. Yeah. And I was pretty heartbroken, I have to say. I took it very badly, but I didn't let on to her because it was an honest mistake. I didn't want her to know the gravity of how I define myself and all these other things she doesn't need to know about my psychology. But,
how I define myself.
Yeah. So I basically,
she didn't need to know that she took my soul, took it out, put it in a blender, then poured it on the ground, and then stamped on it repeatedly.
Yeah, about this. She's done that about loads of other things, but about this specific thing. But anyway, so she went basically did that. But so I was going, God, is there anything? I said, but you know what? If I was going to use them, they would have been used. So whatever, and fine. Because sometimes if I ever got a bit stuck, I'd just go back over things,
Yep.
And but this one particular melody, which was very, very simple, it stuck in my head. And sometimes it's a melody from ages ago going, that doesn't leave my head. And if it doesn't leave my head, there must be a reason it doesn't leave my head. It's because I find it catchy. And if, again, going back to the idea, if it's something you want to hear, then that's what it is.
If it's out there and it wants to be found.
It's out there. Like I say, and doing things creative, it's really for yourself more than anything else. You do it, and if people latch onto it, that's great. I mean, we've been lucky in that none of it. We haven't had any like hits per se, anything like that. But the music does seem to really, really connect with people in a really kind of. That's what we always notice, especially in the States. We have these kind of very loyal people that come to the gigs, and they'll come from all over the place. We've a gig in Asheville now next week, and there's people flying in from here and there because we're not over there that often, and it's usually based on, and this sounds kind of obvious, but it's based on the songs. Some songs, particularly Portion, seems to
resonate with
chime with a lot of people. My portion, yeah. It seems to just, there's a lot of people that just seem to get a lot out of it, given the subject matter. It seems to you should do these things, I guess, for the right reasons. Do them because you want to do them and they're the right thing to do. But it does help when people go, you did something that I really like, but it is about that connection. I keep forgetting what the question was. Sorry, I keep rambling.
Oh, about the songwriting process.
Oh yeah, about the songwriting process. So, that's what we're trying to do. We're always trying to kind of have a couple of songs in our back pocket. I'll kind of have an idea of things that I'm working on. When I start feeling like it again, I'll give Lou the call. We start to do it. We set up a weekly session. Whether we stick to it or not, we go, because you need to be doing it all the time. We should probably be doing more than weekly, but we kind of, there's other things going on in life. We'll get together and we'll build up a body of things. We'll go back over them. And if something is just absolutely banging our heads against the wall, we'll go forget about it, just jettison it, because it just wastes time. You're better off starting something new. That's what's kind of worked for us in terms of our process. We find the important thing is to have like a kind of a good throughput, as you say over there. Kind of, there's just things just keep moving, because that way get a load of stuff and you're more likely, it's like sifting for precious things and whatever. You're just going, you keep putting through stuff and eventually go, okay, like that. And sometimes they don't match up, and doing things like, not getting hung up on it sounding like someone else, or like, oh, there's no point. And then finishing songs, whether they're good, because the mistake I think people often make when they want to write songs and they can't get into it is that they have a song that they like and they're writing it for like 7 years in their head, and they go, I just can't finish it. And I'm like, well, just don't finish it then. Move on to something else, because you're better off having 10 bad songs finished than having one good song that's not finished at all. You know what I mean?
And the thing is, and I've said this recently to my daughter is 16 and she's a songwriter, and she has been writing songs since she was about 12, and at various stages she was getting frustrated in the process because she couldn't write to a standard that she felt she wanted to get to. And, just based on our experience, I was saying to her that every song you write is part of the process of writing that great song.
Yeah.
Every single one of them, doesn't matter how crap you think they are. You got to keep going, because eventually you're going to get there and you're going to hit something. And so never think of, oh, I'm getting so frustrated with this process because I'm not writing something I like. That is part of the process. It really is.
It is,
You know what I
it
mean?
is indeed.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
me, for instance, I was writing songs with my best friend as a teenager. I bet we wrote 300 songs.
Mm-hmm.
3 of them were really good.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
But the thing is, then we started off, we were about 14, and then we were 22, we were still writing songs together. But when we got to that point, it was like, you know, I realized we had been doing a 7-year apprenticeship. You know, we'd been learning, you know, how to sweep the floor of the office and how to cut corners and do all the things you would do in an apprenticeship.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
And then, then it arrived, and then, okay. And then it was like a whole different world opened up at 22.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then you think I've cracked it, and then you go and write the next one, you go, no, that's terrible.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
You
You can still write crappy songs, but you
Exactly.
acquired something different. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so anyway, I don't want to
Hearing you guys talk made me my daughter made me a thing when she was really small. It's a quote from G.K.
Oh.
Chesterton, but it said, "Angels can fly because they take themselves so lightly." And I think your artistic process reminded me of that. And you know, even when you, Dave, used the word throughput, that maybe it's your relationship too, but like everything you guys said to an outsider just reeked of authenticity.
Absolutely.
You know, with the artistic process. And I think, you know, that the spirit, whatever it is, kind of stays close with you, probably because you do find it so easy to jettison and not take yourselves too seriously. Even when you mentioned hits, you know, Mike said he wrote 50,000 songs, had 2 hits. You just said it so cavalierly. Yeah.
No,
and
I know.
you smiled when you said it. There was no resentment
definitely-
in your voice.
Yeah. No one can ever accuse us of taking ourselves too
No.
seriously.
No, right.
there
That's
is-
very apparent. That's very apparent.
Yeah. Now that obviously that's an Irish thing, but it's also it is a thing with musicians. Yeah, they tend to think a lot of the time that they are, they're doing something very, very serious, and they
Very
are.
important.
They are in a lot of ways, but like when people kind of go like, how did you write that? Well, I'm a vessel. You go, you're not a vessel. You're
Well, yeah. And the thing is, there's no, like, Dave was talking earlier on about how important it is for your mental health to have something going, something going on. And sometimes, we as humans tend to think, am I doing things that are important enough in this world? Am I solving major problems? But really, writing a song in many ways is just as important as checking to see whether your rhubarb has sprouted or, researching the cure for cancer. Now, maybe that's not the best example because that genuinely is more important. So I'm trying to think of a better one.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
because I mean,
No,
I
it is,
think
and it is genuine. And we have, like, as I say, when someone goes, "Oh, look, this got me through this struggle," and you were like, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize."
That has been a feature.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
no, there's
So
value in
that's,
it.
there is value in it. You know what I mean? And we're doing it because we want to and we have to and all the rest. But occasionally it does it really means things to people, and that does make it feel worthwhile. And then when you don't do it for a while, I mean, we've been kind of, as I said, we haven't been doing much the last while. We have this tour coming up, and we're kind of quite lazy when there's not going on. We've been doing bits in Ireland and stuff. And then you're like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And then you start writing again and going, oh, that's what was wrong with me. Okay.
But I think even more importantly, I think, and I've written philosophical texts about this, but what happens, I think, with the arts, and the thing is, when you have the arts, sometimes things are not really authentic, and they're served up as if they were, and people make a big deal about them. But things that are authentic, like your music, or the poetry I love, what happens is we as audience to those things, we connect with it. I mean, in such a personal way. I mean, believe it or not, I mean, after listening to your music, saturating myself in the last few weeks in your music, and I feel like I know you. And then I'm talking to you, and I think my intuition was exactly right.
Oh, great.
Oh,
I
wow.
feel like I know you. But I think we have that experience with the music we love, and with the poetry or literature that we love. You feel like you know the person.
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
sometimes something, and this is Simone Weil wrote about this. We talked about it last week on our show. Simone Weil mentioned her encounter with this poem by George Herbert, where she thought Christ came down and took possession of her through her experience of this. Because I think something, and I think it is a spiritual or divine kind of thing that can be translated through music and the arts that adds enthusiasm for life, at the very least, in the audience for the reception of it, and I think that's what I get from your music. Is it bestows a kind of vitality or hope, even with the song is depressing. Like it's the lighthouse, girl of lighthouse.
Yeah, the lighthouse
Song,
daughter.
beautiful. Oh my God! But it's kind of it's steeped in romanticism of that kind, which in romanticism is an affirmation that life means something, even though it's difficult. Right? And your
Very
music
much
does
so.
that. Your music.
You
does
guys
that.
are so likable, that now knowing you more, that it's gonna make my like a deeper dive into your music. Just
Good.
yeah, I'm
It's
just so
amazing.
desirous. So yeah. I just love it
That's
so
great.
much.
No, I mean, and that connection part is real. Happily now it's two-way because we've had this conversation. But I have had this experience with another artist, and I won't mention her name because it doesn't cover me in glory, and she'd probably be embarrassed. But I listened to her album. I had met her at a festival, and then I listened to her album religiously while I was going through a very difficult period. And I didn't know the woman very well at all because I only met her once. But because I had met her and then was listening to her music, in my mind, her lyrics had become very connected with my situation. And one particular night when I was feeling very low and I was pretty drunk, I emailed her. And I emailed her, and obviously the tone of my email sounded like it was we'd been having a conversation, was clearly we hadn't. And she got back to me and she was bewildered. She was very warm and lovely about it, but she was bewildered. And when I saw it the next day, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I just that was the conversation that was happening between me and your album, not between me and you. So yeah, it is. It's very personal, and it can get.
I
very
did
deep.
that once, and I can name the artist because Michael and I met. I read a book he wrote on a theological tradition called Sophiology, and I read it.
Yes.
And I thought this guy's funny. And I wrote a review, and I could have. And then we got connected over that, and I've met many other people. And then I work at a college, and I tell them of my experience, like reading people, and getting so moved by them that when somebody sees the world in a way that's similar enough to yours, but opens it, it's literally mind-blowing. It's the definition of mind-blowing. So countless friends of mine have been through works of art and so forth. But similarly, one night kind of drunk, I wrote to John Popper of Blues Traveler about something, and I never heard back. And but I also looked at it. But the basic ones, I send a note of appreciation, and that person might feel understood too, because and so I resonated with everything you said.
Yeah,
that explains that email I didn't get back from Kate Bush. But anyway,
I wouldn't say she responds to a lot of emails, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Email to Kate Bush.
That's a great story, Louise, that you told. That's a great story.
So to finish up, we're so thankful that you came to have this conversation with us, and
that was lots of fun.
Now, how long is your tour in the States coming up here?
We're over for about a week, just over a week.
Yeah,
over a week. And well, I wish you all the best in that tour.
Yeah, that you guys would suffer the horrors of air travel for a week, right? The last time I flew internationally, I said, if I'm ever going to fly internationally again,
I know it's an ordeal.
Yeah, we're coming up. We're being a bit easier, and we're coming over a day early, so we can kind of go to the festival and stuff like that. So we'll get a bit of time, and we're used to it at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
If one question, a procedural question, if you had mentioned my portion, if I link to say 3 songs when we put this up on YouTube and on the podcast, do you have other ones that you would like? Our demographic is kind of spiritual seekers, probably people looking at. Are there any? 3 that you would like for me to just have direct links to, and I can find them online.
Well, Swans is a very spiritual song.
Okay.
It is about, patterns over thousands and thousands of years and things repeating themselves and ideas of mortality and all that kind of thing.
Portion
Obviously has a very spiritual dimension, even though it is on the subject of addiction, but it's to do with kind of reaching out for something bigger than yourself. And then let me think. I mean, there's a spiritual dimension to a lot of our music. I mean, I suppose
There is.
crosses was the one I mentioned.
Yeah, let's do
often,
crosses because we talked about it too, Louise. Let's do crosses.
Yeah.
And this will lead them into the whole corpus.
Unless there's anything else, Dave.
No, I mean, it's not spiritual, but there's about a bird in an airport terminal. We have a nice new video that we
That's a
did for
beautiful
that.
song.
Yeah, you like that one. And Michael Martin, are you aware that you have the same name as our last Taoiseach?
Micheál Martin.
I am aware of that. And
Okay.
I'm
Are you also
sorry
aware?
to say.
Are you also aware? Has anyone ever told you that you sound very like Alan Alda?
Oh, from Matt.
Yeah.
No, somebody did tell me I look like Donald. What's his name? Donald.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Donald Sutherland.
Sutherland, yeah.
In the
Sound
cage
very
fish
like
cloud
Alan Alda.
busting video. Right.
Oh yeah,
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a man. Yeah, take that.
Michael Martin sounds like Alan Alda. That's funny. Yeah, I see it. I get it. I hear it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my 7th season on MASH. But yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, how about this? Sometime, Michael, when you guys are in the area, sometime between Michigan and upstate New York, or maybe you're just close to me, Michael can make the trip. But we'd love to meet you guys in person sometimes. We'll come see you.
Yeah.
go ahead. You can stay at my farm, and we'll pick in the barn.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
man, sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
We do a lot, and
Oh, that sounds
it'd be wonderful. In fact,
Fantastic.
speaking of that, this is a little commercial here. So for the rest of this month, anybody who subscribes to my Substack, gives a paid subscription, will get a free copy of our theme music. From
Cool.
we have our bumper music as this tune I wrote.
Cool.
But it's the
In
whole,
what
the whole
format,
song you get
dare
for
I
free.
ask?
It's
So
great. It's called The Wind and the
somebody emailed me this week asking for if it was on Spotify, and I can't believe it's not, but it's not. So I'm going direct to the customer.
All right. Way to
Oh
go.
yeah. Very good.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to rename your band. I draw, but no, I want to add to the name that I don't make mistakes, right?
I don't make
That's
mistakes.
the,
I love this. I need to see this.
I don't make mistakes.
I don't make
And I'll
mistakes.
maybe just for shits and giggles, if I find that review in that line, I'll just send it to you in email. Say like I'm not
Yeah,
I
lying.
think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you so much for joining us, Dave and Louise.
Great.
And thanks everybody for listening to the Regeneration podcast. We'll see you next week.